Yeah, that's what the gentleman. What's next time?
So good. I heard the last presentation. You realized, oh, I have yours.
Yeah, I lost it.
Because I don't want it. Thank you. Or maybe some of it.
Yeah, that'd be good. So, yeah, each person needs to get one of those and one of these.
Please, what are those?
They're multiple devices, but it's systems. Delete, I think that will come.
I have to check. I don't want to see.
Are you staying for the Bluetooth?
Yeah.
And book, this is hardware. You got the Bluetooth?
Are you doing the Bluetooth?
Did you get a book? Oh, yeah. This will be a smaller class, but I'm just going to get to have more questions on this one.
I'm back.
Back.
This is the go-to.
Is the material in this one?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Oh, you just use my laptop then. So. You need one?
They're very small, just as a way. Name whatsoever.
Why did we get coming up with?
Because buzzword, we love them.
This is the PhoneGap Bluetooth.
Oh. What's the Bluetooth?
Yeah.
Basically. Which one? You're gonna have to not eat. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go with this. We'll take your stuff. We're gonna go with so. This is.
Just remember to grab your badge tomorrow.
Unfortunately, but this one looks fine.
See how to make this conferencey thing work?
Do you have Cheat?
It's plugged in. It just didn't turn on for some.
Do you want to start the connect session just to record? Yeah.
Actually, Firefox doesn't work very well.
Oh, really?
I don't have the plugin a lot installed, I don't think. For Firefox.
Okay.
And this will record the whole screen.
Whatever you want.
And if it doesn't record, that's fine. We'll put all the slides up and everything, so. All right. Oh, a few more people coming in. So does everyone, except for the people that just came in, do you guys have the book and the Texas Instruments box? You're also going to need to put your laptop and your phone on the PhoneGap network, or just make sure they're on the same network. If you prefer to tether rather than do your phone, that's fine too. You know, he tried to start that, and what do I need to do that?
Okay. Okay.
Install something smart. All right, so while it's getting going, if these slides are all online, if you go to don.github.io, there'll be a link to the slides. We want to have your phone and your laptop on the same network because we're going to be using the PhoneGap Developer App. And cool. All right. So today we're going to be talking about Bluetooth. We're going to use Bluetooth Low Energy, which shares a name with Bluetooth Classic, but is different. They both run on 2.4 gigahertz. Bluetooth Classic is to a car, your phone to speakers, things like that. Bluetooth Classic is good. You can push a bunch of data over it, but you're limited to doing things that the Bluetooth Consortium said you can do. You know, like hook to a phone, to your car, things like that. Bluetooth Low Energy shares a name. It was a different technology that was brought in. One of the things that I really like about Bluetooth Low Energy is you get to define your own services. So if I'm creating hardware, I can create a service and have that service be specific to my hardware. One of the things is the name implies low energy. It works good for battery-powered devices. And also from a programming and mobile apps perspective, it's really easy to access Bluetooth Low Energy from iOS. It's difficult and expensive. You got to join developer programs to access Bluetooth Classic from iOS. So that was kind of one of the reasons I started to get into it. And then once I started building stuff with it, it seemed good. The other thing is Android has come a long way. Android 4.3 released Bluetooth Low Energy APIs. They've been getting a lot better. The latest Android hardware has good Bluetooth radios and pretty decent software to go along with that. So if you look at Bluetooth, there's this big stack of stuff from physical hardware stuff all the way up to applications. Today we're going to be way up at the applications layer. We're going to dip down into the first two layers, the generic access profile and the generic attribute profile. And those are names you should be familiar with, but it doesn't really, you don't need it as much to understand the concepts. So this beginning part, I'm going to go quickly through some concepts, and then we're going to write some apps to exercise those concepts so you can learn more about it. So the thing about Bluetooth Low Energy, if we had a light bulb that we wanted to control with Bluetooth, we would need to make a light bulb service. And that service would have some characteristics on it. Those characteristics could be a light switch and a dimmer setting. Everything in Bluetooth Low Energy gets a UUID. So we would give it FF10, FF11, and FF12 would be our UUIDs. And those are just going to be handles that we can refer to these characteristics and services in code. UUIDs are actually 128-bit strings, and those numbers we had before were 16-bit strings. If you get a 16-bit UUID, it can be expanded out to the 128-bit version by using that base UUID there. Not something you really have to worry about. The libraries are going to take care of that for you. But if you're looking at services that are out there and exist, some will have short 16-bit UUIDs, and some will have the longer 128-bit UUIDs. If you're making your own services, you should use 128-bit UUIDs. So along with the UUIDs, we need some other things. Our characteristics have properties. So we'll have read and write on both of these properties. So I can read the state of the light bulb. I can write to set the state of the light bulb. And then we'll have the value. And the value is the actual data that we're reading and writing. So on is 1, 0 is off. And then for the dimmer setting, we'll have between 0 and 255, or 1 byte to control how bright things are going to be. So now we have this light bulb, and I want to control it. With Bluetooth Classic, you go through a pairing thing. You push a button, you do a scan, you enter a passcode, and then the devices are paired together. Most Bluetooth low energy devices don't work like that. Most Bluetooth low energy devices advertise themselves, and then the central device, which would be the phone in our case, does a scan, and it scans for peripherals that are advertising. And then it can give you a list of peripherals that are out there. Then you can click on one of those and say, hey, I want to connect to this particular device. So the light bulb would be advertising. You would advertise yet another UUID. If you're on Android, you would see a MAC address there. On iOS, iOS under the covers takes that MAC address, hides it, and generates a UUID that you'd see. You get some other information, services about it, stuff like that. So there's an app called Light Blue, and that's a generic Bluetooth client. That's for iOS. There's one for Android called NRF Master Control Panel. And basically what these things will do is they'll let you go out there and scan for Bluetooth devices and connect to them. See if I can get my phone to...
Say, Don,
yes.
do the low energy ones have a shorter range than the classic ones?
No, a lot of it used to be 10 meters was Bluetooth Classic. There's some Bluetooth low energy things that do up to 200 feet, I think. I'm not exactly sure. The advertised range is pretty high. The actual range depends on how many walls and other things are in the way. And there's some people that have specific high power Bluetooth things. So a lot of it's going to be how the hardware is tuned. If they're tuning for battery performance, the power will be down low. If you're tuning for distance and maybe it's something plugged in, they can crank that up higher. That's something the hardware engineers do a lot better. I'm a software guy, so. So I have Light Blue here, and maybe a fake light bulb. There we go. And this Arduino here acting like a light bulb. So if I scan on here, there's a lot of Bluetooth stuff. There we go. So that name, it's called LED. So if I click on there, it goes in and starts to discover the services that are available. So I can see there's a power switch, a brightness, and a color. So if I click on the power switch, I can write a new value. So I can write 00, and that light shuts off. I don't know if you guys are able to see that there. And then if I write a new value, and I write 1, we can turn that back on. Same thing with the brightness characteristic. We could crank the brightness up to FF, and it would make that brighter. So now that's using a generic Bluetooth client. So it's a really good way to kind of reverse engineer things and see what's going on by introspecting them. Some things can be designed, and I put descriptors in so you can actually see what the characteristics did. Some things really try to be obtuse, and you got to read the manual and reverse engineer a lot of stuff. So what we're going to do today, instead of using generic Bluetooth clients, is we're going to use PhoneGap, and we're going to write some specific clients. So I can also write a PhoneGap app that would connect, and it would allow me to control these lights by setting the characteristics and doing things like that. So we don't have enough time to build Arduino hardware today, so we're going to use this TI sensor tag, which has some built-in sensors and Bluetooth stuff, and we're going to do the PhoneGap side of this. But so after we scanned, we decided to connect. And then once we connected, we could discover the peripherals and see what was, we could discover the services and see what was in there. So there's a screenshot of what I did. Once you're connected, you can choose a characteristic. You choose that by your UUID. You can read the value. So that generic client I had read the value of the light and said, hey, it was 1, it was on. We can also write a value. When I wrote 00, it turned it off, and then the server or the light bulb in this case said, okay, it's off. There's another kind of server-initiated communication, which is when the light bulb, in this case, would reach out and tell the phone something. Doesn't really make sense for a light bulb, but for things like sensors where you're measuring values, instead of reading and polling when you're reading, which uses a lot of battery, it's better to say, hey, I want to be notified when something changes, and then when something changes, the device reaches out and tells you. Yes?
So something like a light bulb, right? If there was a manual switch on it, that might be a place where you'd say, oh, somebody walked up and turned the light on or turned the light off.
Yes.
To update you.
And actually on this, I don't have a dimmer on this hardware, but on some hardware I actually have a dimmer and it'll move the slider on the screen. So you can use it for that. We're going to see that with a temperature sensor and a button during today's exercises. So the thing to remember out of all this is that peripherals provide services, and the light bulb would be a peripheral, or the sensor tag is a peripheral. And the central device, or the phone in this case, is going to discover advertising peripherals. It's going to connect to them using the MAC address or the UUID. It can find what services and characteristics are there, and then it can read and write those or subscribe for notifications.
Question.
Yeah.
During connection establishment, what about access control?
For the most part, we're using what security is what's called just works. So if we request to connect to it, it's going to allow us to connect to it. Don't have enough time to go into the security stuff now. We can talk about that a little bit after, or maybe while the exercises are going on. But yeah, it's much better for things that you don't care as much about who connects to them. So this is not something that's included in the base Cordova. I've written a plugin that provides the JavaScript Bluetooth API. So if you're using Cordova or PhoneGap, you would need to install this plugin. We're using PhoneGap Developer App. This plugin is built into there, so we don't actually have to install that today when we're doing these things. With PhoneGap Developer App, we run that on our phone. We run a server on our computer, and then it'll load the app over HTTP so that we don't have to go through the Android or the iOS build cycle and keep deploying. We can deploy very quickly and really test these apps out. Plus, it also means you don't have to install all the native SDKs on your machine, which is good. So here's a picture of the TI sensor tag. Texas Instruments donated all this hardware for us today, so you get to take that home and mess with it later, which is good. There's a bunch of sensors in there. Temperature sensors, humidity, barometric pressure, motion tracking. The motion tracking has accelerometers and gyroscopes, something else. There's some LEDs on there. That link there has all the documentation for doing a lot of this. Today we're going to cover the temperature sensor, the buttons, and the LEDs that are on there. So we don't have a lot of time. We're going to build some apps, but probably what's better is that if we download from GitHub, we download the source, and we can step through and go through what's happening. And then if you want to know more, you can go back and see later. All these apps build upon each other. So the first one goes out and just scans for peripherals and gives us a list, similar to light blue that I showed there. The second one will let you click on an item in that list and connect to it, and then it'll just dump a JSON description of all the services that are on there. The third app will respond to button input from the sensor tag. You'll push a button in, it'll tell you on the phone whether the button's pressed and which button's pressed. Then we'll control an LED on the sensor tag. And then finally, we'll read the temperatures on the sensor tag. So the first exercise is scan. I'll show you some screenshots so you kind of have a mental exercise, a mental picture of what we're going to do here. If you haven't used PhoneGap Developer App, the first thing you do when you fire it up is you have to put an IP address in that you're going to connect to. When you start PhoneGap Serve on your computer, it's going to tell you what your IP address is, so you type that in. On iOS, you're going to see UUIDs for all the services that are found. If you're running on Android, so we got iOS on the left here, Android on the right. On Android, you'll actually see MAC addresses of devices as you're scanning. The API calls we're going to use the scan API call. That we're going to pass in an empty array, and that's saying scan for any services that are out there. Later on, we'll restrict that to only find the sensor tag, but our initial one, we want to find any devices that are out there. We want to scan for 5 seconds, which is usually enough time to find things. Then we have, like most Cordova API calls, we have a success callback and a failure callback. Our success callback is on discovered device. And what we're going to do in there, we get past the JSON description of this peripheral that we've scanned. And we're just going to print out the name, the ID, and the RSSI. The RSSI is a relative signal strength indicator, and we can use that to kind of guess how far away a device is from us. It's really kind of sloppy. It really needs to be used in combination with transmit power to get good numbers. But if you're guessing, you want to look at the one that has the lowest or the closest to 0 number, and that will be the device closest to you. So for the next step, I think if people go to GitHub, can't remember the repo info on. PhoneGap BLE workshop. You can either clone this if you're used to using Git, or if not, is a download zip in the corner. Just download a zip file of everything, and that'll get you copies of all the source code. And then if you're following along in the book, you want to start off at chapter 2, and then I'll talk about the scan. So the book assumes that you're going to be typing a lot of stuff in. So you may just want to, you can either, copy and paste into a new app or just run the examples. Probably since we have only a little bit of time, I would say just run the examples and look through how things are working. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to get that going. I'll walk around. If you're having problems with PhoneGap tooling or anything, just raise your hand. We'll make sure we get you set up with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't support this one yet, but I have an iPod you could use for your class.
What I want to do? Oh.
Yeah, we know YouTube APIs are a little bit tricky with that. You have
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So, is there any chance I can run? Sorry.
No? Here, you can use that. Use some hardware.
Just kind of happy to serve it. Really get a good use out of that developer app.
Yeah. No, I've used it for this guy. Great.
Oh, really?
The first time I tried to do it, I went to the task of installing all this data.
Yeah, it's so much overhead.
It took like so much.
That's here's working out.
Tell me, just connect this.
Oh, yeah, so if you're trying to, you're gonna try to go through everything, or if you just wanna run it?
Oh, okay, so this is the problem.
Yeah, this is a full deal, so if you just wanna start it, you would start from PhoneGap server right there. When you're in the scan directory. Hang on. Did you clone the repo? Did you, Okay. Yes, you're okay here. There's, it doesn't have a whole lot of stuff in it because, the PhoneGap Developer App really takes care of a lot of that for
Or so you can just do PhoneGap serve, just serve right there.
I'm more familiar with Cordova.
Yeah.
CLI.
And you can do Cordova CLI if you want, with all this stuff, you just need to have install the plugin, you need to install the dialogues plugin, and then install the Bluetooth plugin.
So I'll go to that. There's two. Yes.
Okay. So now you want to open the command prompt? Just that wrong type CMD is probably the easiest way to do it. Although we thought it was that's that might crash. And then change into the direction you downloaded it. Yeah, you should be able to cut and paste that. If you click on, if you click right in there, it should get you copied that whole. Yeah.
That's me. Sorry. Oh, you don't? Okay.
Is your phone on the same? Is it on the PhoneGap network?
Uh-huh. Oh, you want to change this to whatever you're using there? Let's see here. I think we're going to add a project. Yeah, wherever it is.
Oh, you know what? You're actually looking inside the zip file. You need to extract it out. Yeah.
There you go.
You may have extracted it out. I may just be looking in the other one. So.
So what is this? Oh, maybe you got to go into one of the individual ones. Yeah. Scan one, I guess. That.
Oh.
You cannot crash. Then you can.
You know, I had a few other phones that were crashing, and I don't know.
That's right.
If you could open up the source code, index.js under
I think it was already running.
under the scan directory.
Oh, you have that arrow here?
And maybe there's just too many devices on there.
It says your error is.
www.js, index.js.
I think it's going to use that.
On-device discover, or you can put an if online 23.
Yeah, just go ahead and restart it.
Put if, and then device.name. And open brackets, we'll just filter.
Okay, there it goes. And
No, I'm sorry, device.name is property. Bracket to open verb statement on the outside of the parentheses.
oh,
Yeah, that bracket, yep.
thank you.
And then move the end bracket all the way down to 31.
Use the developer app or this desktop app.
So let's try that. So save that and then
Desktop.
reload the app and see if that makes a difference.
Okay, there you go.
Do you know what version of iOS you're on?
Yeah, so and just take that address.
Yeah.
921.
Yeah.
Well, at least we're all consistent. That's unfortunate.
Is it crashing?
Yeah. You guys are crashing too?
Yeah.
I know like your instructions say to install 5.4.0, but the latest one is 5.4.1. I'm wondering if that could be something. I might just try to downgrade and see.
If you could try to downgrade, that would be good to see if that makes a difference. I don't think it will. I think it's probably something in my library, but what does it say here? I was gonna say,
There you Perfect.
go to the command prompt and just started it. Oh, mine's crashing too. That's awesome. Let me try on mine. We had one person that was crashing earlier today, so I don't know what stuff that is. Can you see it? Connect? So maybe it's the PhoneGap version. I'm running PhoneGap. .536 and oh no, maybe it just crashed there.
Is it crashing on the dev app?
Yeah, I just tried to downgrade it to 5.4 and it didn't, 5.40, it didn't work.
Yeah, I'm thinking it may be related to the, I don't know.
And I have an idea of what the error might be, or how
Yeah.
to debug. I don't remember how to do it off the top. If you go to the details.com.
Mm-hmm. Hang on a second, let me just see if I got a stack trace.
Okay.
Right, and it's working. I think because you're running Android, I think Android is probably fine, and I have some bug that got introduced into iOS. But it's weird that it wasn't, we had one person this morning that was crashing and almost everyone else was working. So, but would you say docs.gap.com?
And I'm just gonna go into that debug section. There's like a little error handler. I can't remember off the top of my head, but PhoneGap Developer on the left side.
I'm not seeing it here. You drive.
Oh, okay. Alrighty, so basically we're just gonna. You got the reverse.
Did you go into the index.html for scan?
Alright, so take this. Is it completely crashing or is it?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I wonder. Oh, you can try adding this on error function, and then that might get you the error, at least console logging it.
Oh.
And then it'll
That's a
show up
cool
in
trick.
your little, yeah, it'll show up in your server, and you might be able to find what's going on there.
It's still crashing. Oh, that's really unfortunate. What time is that? 6. So we wait now. All right. One of the things that this may have to do with there may be too many devices being scanned and it's overloading something to the plugin and crashing. I don't know. I want to skip ahead a little bit and talk about some of the other apps. One of the things we may be able to do is we really limit the number of devices we connect to in the button and some of those other ones. And then, so at least you guys have a little bit to work forward on, and I'll work on trying to get some of these a fix for this. So assuming the scan app was not crashing, you would, we're going to Connect extends on scan. So Connect has a list of devices, and then what it allows us to do is we can click on one of those devices in the list, and then it'll discover all of the services and characteristics, and then it'll print us a JSON description. So we edit the HTML page, and we just put a pre-section in, or we actually put another div, so we use 2 divs to switch back and forth, and there's a pre-section where we just dump that JSON into that. Once again, this is going out and discovering all the Bluetooth devices, so it may be crashing the same as the other one. In here, we use a API called Connect. We pass the device ID that we got from our scan, and then we have our success and failure callback. And then onConnect also gets a peripheral description. This peripheral description has more information than when we did the scan. It has the name and the ID and all that, but it also has the services and characteristics. So we stringify that and print that out. If we jump ahead to the button, what the button does, so on the sensor tag, if you flip it over, there's a power button on one side. There's an actual regular button, which is just the square, the rectangle one. And then there's also a read switch, which is a switch which can be activated by a magnet. In here, we actually need to use a service to make this happen. So the sensor tag has a button service. They actually call it the simple key service, but I think button service makes more sense. And FFE0 is the UUID, and FFE1 is the UUID of the characteristic. So there'll be some constants in the code that have those UUIDs. We get a value that's 1 byte back, and we can decode the bits in that to tell which key is actually pressed. So here's a screenshot. One of the other things this app does is instead of scanning for every device out there, it limits the scan to find only sensor tags. And then, so you pick one of the sensor tags, and it says button is pressed. One of the things you'll find out, though, is everybody in here has a sensor tag. So you can try with the RSSI to guess which sensor tag is yours. The other thing you can do is some people with the last one went out in the hallway when they were scanning, and they held it close and found the UUID or the MAC address of their sensor tag. And then when it's listing the devices, you can put if device ID matches, and then just put part of that in there to do some filtering. I can help people filter if they want to do that. And once we've connected, we're going to use a notification. So the API for that is called start notification. We pass the device ID in, the button service, the data characteristic, and the success and failure callbacks. The success callback is the important one here, on notification. The on notification callback can be called many, many times. Basically, anytime the button is pressed, that on notification will be called. And then in the on notification, we get an array buffer of data. One of the things when we're dealing with Bluetooth, almost everything needs to be an array buffer because we don't know what data is there, so we put in that generic bytes. And then because we're expecting to get a 1 byte value back, I turn it into a typed array, so a uint8 array. There's some constructors that take that. Depending on the data, that's how you pick which kind of typed array. And then I grab that first element of the array. If the first element is 0, no buttons are pressed. If it's not 0, a button is pressed. So we print that out. So I would suggest skipping the connect one if that's crashing and move on to the button one, see if that's better. And I'm going to try a little debugging here on mine to see if I can get this to
Yeah, what's on Android? What's on Android?
works on Android. Okay. Oh, the other thing you need to do, if you want to find the sensor tab, first is a little plastic tab that you need to pull out. That tab is between the battery, so that'll activate it. And then when you're holding the back, looking towards you with these two slots, push the power button, which is on the left-hand side, for 3 seconds. There should be a little green LED that blips. When that green LED is going, that means the device is advertising. Once you connect to it, that green LED will stop. The behavior of most devices is when a client connects to it, it stops advertising. When the client disconnects, it will start advertising again. These things, you really have to look at it. If the button's not blinking, hold that power button for 3 seconds.
For this one, it seems to crash when you tap on one of the buttons now, for the button example.
Oh, nothing like demo is not working. So if you can get it to connect, it should look like this, where you can say the button is pressed, the button is released. And the magnetic read sensor is underneath the power button. And if you have a MacBook, you can usually run along the top, and there's a magnet on there, and it'll say the button is pressed as you cross over the magnet.
Oh, do release iOS. Oh, but you don't have the certificates, right?
Oh, no, it is trying to run.
Okay, just do
Okay, so I would go to the
release
in there,
dash iOS.
CD into the button directory.
Oh, will that work? How do you look at it?
And then type PhoneGap,
Well, the
search.
thing is, the development way of doing developer doesn't really work without having certificates. Actually, didn't that can't run
Did you install
dash
PhoneGap?
iOS.
Okay, let me get Tim where he needs to help.
No.
Bless you. So it would crash when you connected to it.
I just want you to get to the point where you do the Xcode. Just go to the Xcode.
Yeah.
That's in the process.
Doesn't it?
So that was how it is. Very first. Okay.
So can I need to find out who this guy is.
Yes. So, yeah, you could do that, or you could, even if the other one doesn't crash when you're scanning, you basically look at the RSSI and see what the lowest RSSI
Right,
is on
okay,
there.
so you're just trying to run off the amp here, right?
Yeah, because the problem with light blue is it actually, you know what, light blue,
Exactly.
so you're better off using the, do you have the TI
yeah,
sensor tag app?
and then
Put that on by chance? Or just go back
usually I
to,
use that one.
do you have the, whatever, the button and scan app, and then it's not crashing.
Oh, you don't have
You
it.
found yours?
The
Okay.
one that had the high signal strength on it.
Yeah.
In light blue.
Yeah, there's another way of doing it.
Oh, okay, you just went off the signal
I'm trying
strength,
to
don't
get
worry
the
about.
PhoneGap desktop app. I will switch there. Did it stop looking at this stuff right here? So you can just use it.
Okay, oh, good, now you give me, yeah, and so then, where it's adding the items to the list, I usually just do like device.ID matches, and then put like the first, 6 characters of UUID.
Should we be writing this down for?
Yeah, it won't change, like if I scanned your tag,
Yeah.
I would get a different UUID, but you should consistently get that UUID for your device.
Right.
Desktop app. Oh, sure.
How's it going?
So
It's just working? Oh, you get an Android, so we should not crashing, I guess.
Yeah, so interestingly, whenever I scan, I just get garbage back.
Okay. Have you seen any errors in
Okay.
PhoneGap servers?
Just trying to
Actually,
remember how to get this.
what finger should we load the app? You know what, just, yes, close it out, restart the server here. Sometimes you'll see if there's a JavaScript error, you'll see the,
There we go.
yeah, actually start the server here first.
Let's see.
Oh, there you go, now you get devices. So I'm gonna type magic. How's it going? Are you able to get this working?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. That one, you don't want to press for too long, so you just gotta, You know, I wonder if it disconnected, or I wonder if we would connect it to. Let's see. Sometimes they get in a weird state where they're disconnected. Oh, here, -25.
You should see mine. There it is. Put that around.
And then, so there's a magnetic sensor.
Alright, so you hit the plus button there, and then you point that towards the opening this component there.
This is a magnet in solution.
You point that towards the exactly, and then that should start serving.
You guys doing okay?
Yeah, so here's the interesting.
What version
So just
of
give me one of these.
There's some version of Android that are really, really finicky with connecting. Can you go into the settings for a second? And I'm guessing it's going to be like Android.
So your computer's my active server, so you're gonna have that loud firewall access.
I'm using this app now instead.
Oh, it's Android 5.
Yeah, that's the shell that
See that error? I think what that error you're getting is it's just immediately disconnected.
what is built on.
What did you just like giant
Yeah.
doors and then maybe that one will crash it.
And that's on the Connect example. Okay.
Yeah,
How
so
about,
find mine.
can you see if that?
If I yours doesn't crash, and you just turn it
It
on.
could just be, oh, you know the other thing to do is, I know this kind of clues you, but turn your Bluetooth off, or turn your Bluetooth back on.
So if your server is running on
That
mobile.
will, there's sometimes things get cached in.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't seem, if you do find your device, and you can click on
Yeah, I don't think
devices in the button example, then it works. But if you
Okay.
click on one that's not your device.
It's too far away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So maybe do that too, once you rescan, hold this close and click on the one with the lowest RSSI to see if that, maybe the one.
How do I put those in as a search
Okay, so what I,
That's the last word of my address.
okay, so yeah, you don't actually, if you only want to find sensor tags, you actually would put AA80 in there. Capital A80. And then sometimes this is actually doesn't work on Android, and you get nothing. So what I was doing is on undiscovered device, I put a big
Yeah, you
stick
wanna
around the hole inside that method there. And then I
think
just
people are
did
having
if
trouble
device.id, and then I checked for my MAC address, because you're, you can actually do a string comparison on the MAC address. And then,
honestly, I haven't done this for
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, it should, and
And
then that way it'll only list your device and it's not one of these.
Makes sense. Thanks.
I was using new, to try to find mine, like to see which one had the strongest connection to me. Once I found that,
Is that one more?
put it right down.
Yeah, well, it's still crashing a little bit, but
Okay. But you can almost get something done.
the light stopped working, so that's probably the right one.
Mhm.
So do you try to download like
Yeah, and then when at -32 is pretty strong reading. So. And then sometimes when you first click on it, there's no wait versus it was discovering. And sometimes it'll miss a touch, so it's demo.
is your laptop on a blink?
Yeah, so if that happens, the easiest thing to do is kill the PhoneGap app and restart because it might actually be
Oh, it looks like
connected
it
in the background.
tried to do it, but it couldn't quite go.
Yeah, it's possible it got orphaned. But actually totally killing the app and relaunching the PhoneGap app will restart.
Okay, I think I know what the problem is. What the process do you, yeah.
All right, I'm going to continue on with my slides here just to tell you a little bit more about some of these other examples, just so you at least kind of know what's happening. I think a lot of people got the button to work. So we were just checking for the presence of data. If there was data, we said a button was pressed, and if there was no data, we said no button was pressed. there's actually a bitmask on those values coming back. So we can look at that, and so if we get a 1, we know that the regular button is pressed. If we get a 2, we know that the power button is pressed. If we get a 3, we know that both those buttons are pressed. And then 4 is a read switch. So if you get a 7 back, that would mean all the buttons were pressed. So if you look at the button V2 example, we basically do a bitwise AND on those flags, and we build up the messages. So that instead of just saying a button is pressed, we tell you which buttons were pressed. So this is in app on notification. The version 2 of the code has all this in there. And then when you run, you get more useful examples like this, where you can see what button was pressed or what button wasn't pressed. And so really the main purpose of the button example was to show you that the peripheral can reach out and tell the phone what's happening. In the LED example, we do exactly the opposite. We have the phone control the device. And those are kind of the 2 big things that you need to know how to do. If you can do these small building blocks, you can build and use most other services. So you guys have seen the little green blinking LED when you try to get the device advertising. Above that green LED, there's a red LED, and we can control that. There's something called the I/O service, which lets us control it. The I/O service uses 128-bit UUID, so we have that nice big long UUID. And the one in bold is AA64. That gets incremented for each of these. So there's 2 things. There's a data characteristic and a configuration characteristic. The data lets us control which device is on. The configuration characteristic turns this on. So the first thing we need to do is on the configuration characteristic, we need to write a 1 to that to say, turn the I/O service on. Once we've turned the I/O service on and we start to write data, it'll listen to do what the data says. You could just start writing data, but it'll ignore it until the service is on. So here's a screenshot of that app, where basically, it's always going to look the same. You're going to list the devices. If you click on your device, we have a button. The on button sends a 1. The off button sends a 0. So we're going to use BLE write for this. And we're going to have to do this in 2 different places. So in onConnect, we're going to want to turn the configuration service on. So we take the peripheral ID, we pass in the I/O service, the configuration characteristic, and then we write a literal 1 to there. So what I'm doing here is I'm making a new uint8 array with a literal value of 1 in there. I do that by passing in an array with 1 in there. If you just passed a 1 in, it would make a buffer with the size of 1. And then I call .buffer on it. What buffer does is it turns the typed array into an array buffer, since the API or the Cordova bridge wants an array buffer to go across it. And then we have the success and the failure callback. And then the other thing we do is when you push one of those buttons, we call LED on, LED off, which then calls a method called setDataValue. And we take that data value and we, once again, we write to the other characteristic. We write to the data characteristic, and we have a buffer that has the value, and so we pass that in. And so as you do that, you can see the light turn on and off. Actually, you know what? I'll keep going with my slides here for this. So that's version 1. If you do version 2, there's also a bitmask for this data. And by passing in different things, we can control the red LED, the green LED, and there's actually a buzzer on here. And so the same thing, kind of like we decoded the bitmask before, here we encode it with a bitwise OR, and we put all those values into one data, and we pass that in. And we adjust the UI a little bit. So we have checkboxes so you can turn those on and off at multiple times. I mean, multiple things on and off at the same time. Okay. So when that light's blinking, it means it's advertising. We want to put it to refresh. And then what we want to do is we want to find the one with the lowest number, so negative 31, or the highest number. So negative 31 is installed. Yeah, this is a really old device, so it takes a while to discover. And now once we're connected, then we can push the button. It works. Oh, it changes the text, so it says button is released, and then we see button is pressed. Yeah, that's the button. And if you press the power button, it says it's pressed also. If you hold the power button down too long, it reboots. Cool. So now that you got that working, you can load one of the other options. You can either load button V2, or you can try to load the LED. And then that will show. So this is communication going from the peripheral to the central, and the other one goes from the central.
Use this desktop.
No, button V2 is essentially the same, it just decodes it. LED is the one that I would do LED, or actually run LED V2.
The second one now. Okay, looks like it's downloading. Yeah, it's trying to download it right now. Looks like
Is this how you specify?
I would do, if you do triple equals in there, so if device, and actually device.id. Triple equals.
Well, it depends what's in that folder.
Try that.
It's a big folder.
They have to adjust that
Let's see why
case,
it's
but I
taking
think
this.
it should make it.
Like usually if it's like this small example that you're working on.
Yeah, disconnect first. Sometimes it doesn't always reload, so if you hit 3 fingers, it will go back to the initial screen. It's supposed to automatically reload, but sometimes the WebSocket gets lost.
I'll wait, I'll tell you what happened.
So you save file, that's pretty. That's about so quick. No, sorry, no. Oh, wait, that's
Start
in
modifying it.
Why is those other 2 in there? I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, it hasn't yet? So the 3-finger tap is to go back to this screen. Okay. Yeah, and then you can try connecting again. Yeah, same effort, yeah. If that is, if the 3-finger tap doesn't work, you can just close the PhoneGap and start it again.
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna scan one.
Oh, okay. There you go, kind of, it's so funny, I went down to, that's the problem, because all the projects are almost exactly the same. But yeah, copy that over to the, that other one, and that should be exactly what you need. If that doesn't work, we can switch it to a regular expression ignoring case, but I think you'll be fine.
Okay.
How's it going? You able to get some stuff on
To be honest, I've actually never tried.
I will work on the stuff.
Okay, yeah, you should be able to, you should be able to go through it. If you run into any problems, you should be an email. Also, whatever that comment is crashing, obviously I need to figure that out. So hopefully there'll be a new version coming out. The only catch is with PhoneGap Developer App. I need to fix it, and they need to release that. So maybe you're comfortable using that itself. Okay, yes. Yeah, so if you use Cordova, as long as you do install the dialogues plugin and install the BLE plugin that you have there. And I think on my, somewhere I actually have these instructions documented. Then you can run all the edit ones. So when I was developing, I was running Cordova, and I went through testing. Any advantage of using Cordova, it should actually inspect, right? So it should be listed. You put the Safari inspect.
First one you tried.
Oh, yeah.
Is it fresh on that one too?
Is it working? I was actually disappointed that the buzzer's too quiet. I was hoping the whole room was gonna like light up with buzzers and stuff like that, so.
There it goes. All right.
Good.
Much faster now.
Awesome.
Oh, you're just doing the
You guys doing okay?
Is that pointing to the right folder? BLE?
That really stinks. I have an iOS device which may crash differently.
So you could.
If you'd like to try that. Normally, when I'm closer to my office, usually I have a ton of Android devices too, but these were small for back in. I would, are you seeing the same thing on your phone, or is that the same phone?
His phone doesn't do BLE.
Oh, okay.
It's an older version of the.
Yeah, so, but yeah, unfortunately, there's so much, which Samsung phone is that?
This is a.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, this is
Oh, but
like.
an active should just be like an S3 or S4 or S whatever, right?
This
Just
is
an
a,
active.
it's an S5, isn't it?
An S5, okay. No, don't have an S5. We have an S6, an S4, and an S3.
Yeah, this is the index size.
Okay.
So I don't.
Yeah, and so the S3, if it got the software updates, would actually support it, I think. So, but it really depends on the carrier pushes those updates out to you. So,
It doesn't have the update.
yeah. But anyway, give that one a try.
Okay.
And, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, there's a.
It's just sort of. I was just gonna see.
Oh, okay. Pretty bad.
It's not really good. It just looks like it's.
How's it going? You able to make any progress?
My phone's out of commission, but I think.
The only essential, is that just a plugin?
Oh, okay,
That's just
cool.
a plugin that you're looking at. That's not the actual
Okay.
example. That's the plugin that you
What,
can install.
what program we using? We use a Gap tool?
You have to
Or
go
what do you connect
to,
it
this is
when you're
PLE
on?
workshop, which you know.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the plugin itself.
Yeah, yeah, it uses snowboards.
Okay.
So central, leave that.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, is that Sandeep Mystery? Did you write that one too?
Just,
Yeah. So he wrote Noble. He's written rappers.
I think it's just called.
He's written rappers for almost everything. So Sandeep's code is awesome.
Okay.
It seems to be working good.
Good. Yeah, at the end of the day, everyone's like the power star of their devices. Huh?
Yeah, no kidding.
You guys get this working?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out which one was like hers, and then
Okay.
so, because I couldn't find Blue Light for
Mhm.
Android, I just used mine, and then I
Yeah.
wrote down the U.
No, it's gonna be
So then we realized it's different, and
Yeah.
then we're like,
You want to run NRF Master Control Panel is the app to run NRF, figure that out.
And
If you just search for NRF, it should find it.
yeah, the annoying thing is now it's no longer like, can't get a such link anymore because we've connected. So I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
sometimes it gets abandoned, so the easiest thing to do then is to actually kill the app. Sometimes you
Okay.
can get an orphan connection, there's supposed to be some hooks to disconnect it, but there's sometimes where it just doesn't.
Weird as well.
Okay, so in the desktop, or the desktop app?
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna rush you guys a little bit more here. You may not have time to get to the thermometer example, but you might. The thermometer example uses a temperature sensor. In the sensor tag, there's a temperature sensor that gives an IR temperature and an ambient temperature. So it'll give you two different temperature readings. You point it at something hot or cold, you should get different readings. There's a temperature service. This works a lot like the button, except for we need to write 01 to enable the temperature service. And then once we've enabled it, we can subscribe for notifications and we'll get temperature notifications. Unlike the button where we just got 1 byte back, we actually get 4 bytes back. We get 2 16-byte values. And then we run those through a formula to decode those into Fahrenheit or centigrade, depending on your preferred temperature. And once that's working, you'll get, and it can print 2 different values onto the screen. So this is using kind of the same techniques as a button with the press, but here we're getting a more complex data structure back. So we need to create a uint16 array and then decode that and run that through a formula. I got that information by reading the Texas Instruments wiki, and they kind of tell you how the data comes back. And that's a lot of the trick in these things, is figuring out, I want to interact with this service. What does it actually expect? What format does it have to be in? What's the byte order? Things like that. Once you get that, the mechanics of interacting with the services are pretty straightforward. And then, so if you guys are interested, this is kind of based on a longer class. I do a lot of stuff with Arduino also, where you can build this hardware in Arduino and then connect to it. I have a book with a couple co-authors that recently came out. You can check that out. I actually have 2 copies here to give away. So I'll ask some questions, and I hate having to limit it. I wish I had one for everyone, but I don't. You only get hardware. Anyone know how many Bluetooth services the sensor tag offers? Kind of, actually, if you're running the sensor tag app, you would have seen that. It's actually 11, so that wasn't a good question. And I said before I was going to come up with how long are UUIDs?
128 bits.
There you go. And then we'll come up with. Thanks, sir. Enjoy. How do you control whether you can read or write to or notify on a characteristic? I didn't explain that. Oh, yeah.
Has a 1 or a 0 to that parameter.
That's how you actually turn a characteristic on or turn a service on or off. The properties will define if you can read or write or notify on that. If that's determined by the peripheral, whether that happens or not. So, but anyway, I'm out of questions. So that's it. There you go. So I'll still be around to answer a few more questions. And while we got 10 minutes left, you guys get to take the hardware, take the book, work through some of the stuff on your own. I apologize for having those iOS crashes. I'm going to work to get that fixed in the plugin. Then I'll work to get that into one of the future versions of PhoneGap Developer App. So if you're going to be doing this on your own, a better way may be to use direct record over PhoneGap. You would have to install the plugin. To use these examples, you also need the dialogues plugin, and then you can build and install it right from your phone there. But yeah, hopefully I got enough information to be dangerous. You guys can go out, you can write some apps that connect to some services and break some stuff. So thank you.